We are in Romans chapter 1 in one respect that is crystal clear with regard to Paul's teaching about homosexual behavior. You know what's fascinating to me is that in the entire history of humankind, no culture, Christian, Muslim, Jewish, Hindu, Buddhist, even atheist, no culture in the entire history of humankind has officially recognized same-sex marriage. Never. Never. And we're told, of course, that we're on the wrong side of history because now we're more enlightened than everybody else. I'm telling you, with that collective understanding about same-sex marriage, from the beginning of human culture until now, we are on the right side of history to oppose same-sex marriage. And to think that we are somehow more enlightened than all of the other people in the world because we accept same-sex marriage is a very strange way to look at things. I mean, it's arrogant, generationally arrogant to the core. But there is something different about Romans chapter 1 from our time. Romans chapter 1, dealing with idolatry. In the days of the first century when the apostles were writing, people believed in God, or gods, plural. Lots of gods. When Paul goes to Athens and talks to the philosophers on Mars Hill, he says, I'm looking around here and you got lots of gods, but I note that there's one over here, it says to an unknown God. They want to make sure they covered all their bases, so here's to an unknown God. He says, well, let me tell you about that unknown God. And then he proceeds to talk about the one true living creator God. But in those days, in the first century, people believed in gods, in divinity, in something supernatural, something above the natural world, outside of the natural world. And typically, gods who, even if they were corrupt gods, as many of the idolatrous gods were, those gods were recognized and worshiped and assumed by virtually everyone who ever lived. Today in our culture, what's different about Romans 1 from now is that we have given up on the idea of God. If, in fact, Darwin is right about the origin of humankind, if he was right in saying, I want you to understand that God has nothing to do with this. You don't need God. There is no God in this picture. We are not here because God created us in any shape, form, or fashion. Once you get rid of God, then you are getting rid of the moral foundation for everything in civilization. Romans 1, they were elevating gods who represented creation. Things in creation, such as birds and fish and who knows what. But today, we worship nature as it were, a nature without God. We don't bow down to wood or stone idols, but we bow down to one God in particular, and that's not the God of heaven. It's not pagan gods. It's not Juno, Apollos, or any of the Roman gods, the Greek gods. We bow down to only one God, and that is ourselves. We now worship ourselves, and God is out of the picture. Our culture, our nation, has remnants, leftover remnants of God, the idea of morals, the idea of divine judgment, afterlife, and so forth. We pay lip service to that. But fewer and fewer people are buying into that package. More and more young people are believing that there is no God. We have militant atheism, whereas we used to have sort of intellectual atheism, but now it's atheism knocking at your door saying, if you dare to believe in God, we're coming after you. It's a whole different world from Romans 1 than it was. And so ever since Darwin, really, and the whole naturalistic focus or approach to understanding life, we got rid of God, and so we are a godless nation on its way to being officially godless, and that should be troubling to everybody, because that's a shift away from the history of humankind.